Every one of us has infinite potential. We can be our best or worst self, and it's ultimately our own choice. We can all choose to live with courage and consciousness. We can dig deep and discover the most brilliant and beautiful qualities within ourselves. Each one of us has the capacity to reach the greatest heights of altruism, compassion, and genius. Each one of us can be a visionary, a hero, a warrior for good. This podcast means to inspire, encourage, and uplift, to help you see the amazing potential within yourself that you can begin to actualize today. The concept of ruthless compassion will inform this series. Living with ruthless compassion means practicing loving kindness and fierce honesty. With ruthless compassion, we can forgive ourselves for our mistakes and be flexible enough to change directions. Our actions can be grounded in wisdom and integrity, and we can start creating positive and lasting change for ourselves, our communities, and our world. Join me on this amazing journey where you'll discover how ruthless compassion can help you to become the very best that you can be, and where you'll learn how to live in the world with greater love, freedom, clarity, and joy. I'm Dr. Marcia Sirota, writer, speaker, psychiatrist, and all-around troublemaker. Welcome to the Ruthless Compassion Podcast. This is Ruthless Compassion with Dr. Marcia Sirota. Today, we're delighted to welcome Dr. Eva Selhub. Eva Selhub, MD, is an expert in the fields of stress, resilience, mind-body medicine, and working with the natural environment to achieve maximum health and well-being. She's a lecturer in medicine at Harvard Medical School and a clinical associate of the Massachusetts General Hospital. She was medical director and senior physician at the Benson Henry Institute for Mind-Body Medicine at the Massachusetts General Hospital for 13 years. Eva Selhub runs a private practice as a comprehensive medical specialist and transformation consultant. Dr. Eva Selhub is author of Your Health Destiny: How to Unlock Your Natural Ability to Overcome Illness, Feel Better, and Live Longer, available on Harper One Press. So, welcome, Dr. Eva Selhub, to the Ruthless Compassion Show. It's really great to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure.
I was very curious about your journey from where you came from and how you got to where you are today, because you wear so many interesting hats: teacher, meditator, author, speaker. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey?
I'd love to tell you about my journey. It's a long one. So, as many of the listeners may not know, I did start my journey out with a desire to be a doctor, but as a child, I actually wanted to be a medicine woman, more, working with indigenous herbs and things like that. I always found that to be intriguing. I loved that show. My father, as a scientist, wanted me to go down the real route, as he put it, and that's what I did. However, I always felt that even though the medical world was fascinating and interesting, and I really loved it, it wasn't enough. There was something missing. And that sort of, was in the back of my mind the whole time that I was studying and working, doing my residency in medicine and planning to do a fellowship in pulmonary medicine. And then in the middle of my residency, my medical residency, I was stuck with an HIV needle. And it was a pretty bad exposure. Nobody needs to worry. Nothing actually happened that was bad in the end. I didn't convert to HIV, but it was a pretty close call. And I was told to go on the medications to prevent me from converting to HIV, which made me extremely ill. So during that period, which was a really difficult period, I really was convinced, back in 1996, there was nothing you could do for HIV. You pretty much just saw people wither away in just horrible deaths. And that's what I thought my fate was going to be, and did a lot of soul searching and bargaining. And I really came to realize that I wasn't on the path I needed to be on, and that rather than keeping people alive, my journey was really about teaching people about how to have a life and about resiliency. And so I set out on my course to discover what it is I needed to learn to be able to do that. And during, the course of that year, I decided to go into primary care for a while and, just work with sort of the everyday problems. I followed a midwife around. I also started working at the Mind-Body Medical Institute with Dr. Benson, who wrote the Relaxation Response, to learn about meditation and stress physiology and cognitive restructuring, nutrition, exercise. And while working there, they asked me to be the medical director fairly quickly, and had sort of on-the-job training, not only learning about mind-body medicine, but learning about how to run an organization and to learn about, sort of the difficulties of medicine and how to bring in different types of medicine into medicine, integrating it, and bringing different people together sort of in a coalition of care. So it was really a wonderful experience, but even that wasn't enough. And in 2002, I continued on as medical director there, but left my primary care practice to pursue alternative healing, to start studying with masters and healers and understanding more of what is the Eastern traditions all about, what's the Taoist practice about, what are the chakras about, what's Chinese medicine about. And so during that period, I started really integrating everything that I had been exposed to and everything that I'd learned and done into one big practice. And during that time, I had this wonderful experience of my niece being born. And that experience brought me into this understanding what the state of love was all about. And that really was a very similar state to my meditative state. And that's where that sort of gave birth to the first book called The Love Response, which is understanding that at the core of everything that we do is stress, and which is okay, except for when it goes out of control. And the actual physiological antidote to that isn't just the meditative state, but it's really the state of love. And the meditative state is just one aspect of love. And that's what that came about, and understanding that wisdom traditions have been saying that for thousands of years. So from that, everything just kind of grew, and I started, really having in my own practice, really integrating all these modalities with my clients and watching them change and watching their health destiny change, which became, the title of the third book. And also understanding that we're such an intricate part of nature, that's part of our love. It's part of our love response. And it's part of who we are and how we heal. And without it, we actually become more frail and die more quickly. And that was behind the second book that I co-authored with a naturopath called Your Brain on Nature. So that's really where it brings us here today, where I've integrated so many different modalities to bring forward the tools that people need to achieve, health and well-being. And I even hate to say that, because it's not just about health and well-being to me anymore. It's really about fitness. And so part of my journey also included getting fit myself, not only spiritually and mentally and cognitively, but physically. And, I became a big advocate of my CrossFit organization and became at 48 probably the fittest I've ever been in my life, doing things I never thought I could. So really understanding that it's not about stress or about even getting sick. It's actually about our bounce back and our being able to handle anything, come what may, because we're so strong physically, mentally, and spiritually. And so that's what I do. I go into organizations and teach them that. I go do spiritual workshops all over the world, and I coach people all over the world, and, have a practice where I help people get there. And that's my long story.
That's an amazing story. It's really very exciting. When you were talking about medical school and medicine, and you said that you had a feeling that it wasn't enough. And then later on, as you were talking, you also said that, another aspect of your life wasn't enough. And it sounds like you were really listening to your intuition or your inner wisdom that was telling you needed to keep moving forward. Would you say that that's right?
Yeah, but so interestingly, that's what the definition of stress is. So, the definition of stress is simply that your mind, your body is picking up that you're not in a steady state anymore, that you're not in an enough state, right? In any given moment, every cell of your body is asking, is it enough right now? Am I enough? Do I have enough right now to maintain my stability, to maintain my livelihood, to maintain my happiness? And, and that's impossible, because everything's constantly changing and we're constantly changing. So you're not going to sit in the same position for the rest of your life. You're going to find a time when you say, well, it's time to move. And so being able to pay attention to those signals is really your intuition. It's also your ability to pay attention to every sensation of your body, because your body is speaking to you all the time and saying, you know what, it's time to go. It's time to move. It's time to change. And when we listen to that, we change, and we usually can find a solution that helps us feel better, because at the end of the day, it's about finding that relief. So, that's what motivates everything in life. And without that little sort of nag that says, hey, it's time to eat, or hey, it's time to put on something warm, or hey, it's, time to learn something new, we would be dead, literally, we would be dead emotionally, physically, spiritually, and we wouldn't have any innovation and no growth and no change. And we really would be inert and bored otherwise.
For sure. As you were talking, I was thinking how if you want to pay attention to your intuition, you kind of have to slow down and listen, don't you? And so many of us are running around and so busy and so active that maybe we don't tune into that little voice inside of ourselves. How would you encourage people to do that, to hear those messages that are so important?
Well, that is exactly what I do. That is a huge part of the teaching that happens when I work with people, is the understanding that the body whispers before it screams. And it's whispering to us all of the time, 24/7, every millisecond. There's a signal going that the body, in most ways, can actually self-regulate without you knowing that it's doing so. But most of the time, it needs you to pay attention, and that we don't pay attention is what causes us to get sick. I ask people, when you're tired, what do you do? And most people drink caffeine. When you're tired, your body's saying, I need to rest. When it's time to go to sleep, normally we would have, our ancestors would just go to sleep. There was no such thing as light. Now we just turn on the light. So we artificially cause ourselves to keep going for some, strange, openly or hidden agenda of becoming more than we are, because underneath we're not feeling enough, or we don't have enough money, or we don't have enough time, or we don't have enough love. And so we push ourselves to get there. And that by doing so, we ignore what the body's actually telling us it wants. And if you slow down and start becoming a little bit more silent, a little bit more quiet, to pay attention to what these signals are, and not only that, learn about what these signals are. You don't even understand the language of your body anymore, to become more mindful of that information. Then you actually will know what to do before it becomes a problem.
So what you're really saying is that if we slow down and pay attention, then our inner wisdom will also tell us how to take care of ourselves.
Sometimes it will and sometimes it won't. Okay? Sometimes you need to do some due diligence and find out some information and find out what it is you need to do, or go and ask. That's why we have teachers and counselors and encyclopedias and Google. So it's going to motivate us to find out what we need to do to create a solution. So sometimes that solution is evident. Sometimes our intuition says this is what you need to do. But I also feel that, it's oftentimes when you're close to a situation and not objective, it's very challenging to separate your intuition from your fear, from what you really want, to really get into a place where you're not unattached to the outcome. And that's the only time when you really can actually make a very good decision based on your intuition, is when you're not attached to a given outcome. So, it really is about slowing down and being quiet and doing your research. That's why in Your Health Destiny, I have, the word that I give people to work with is called power, which is, getting your power. But the first letter is P, which is pause, right? Slow down. But O is about optimizing your knowledge. So it's not just about being quiet enough to listen to inner wisdom, which is knowledge. And, we learn that from wisdom traditions. They help us along with what that inner wisdom is. But it's also finding out, what does the literature say? What does Google say? What do other people, have to inform me and teach me? What is it that I need to learn about my body? What is there some anatomical stuff I need to learn? What's the medical information I need to know? What are the risks and benefits of this? So really, it's also about doing your due diligence and optimizing knowledge.
That makes a lot of sense. I wanted to get back to the concept of love, because I guess that's one of the things that started you off on your journey, this idea of how important love is and how it mirrors that state of bliss in meditation. And love means something different to everybody. What does it mean to you, and why is it so important for us to connect with love?
Well, love to me, is a physiological state that can be accessed through different scenarios, depending on, it could be romantic love, it could be platonic love, it could be spiritual love. In my book, I break it down into a love pyramid, which is social love, self-love, and spiritual love, which all take on different forms, again, depending on the context. But at the end of the day, the physiological response is fairly similar, depending on, what the circumstance is. The physiological state is fairly similar And that state is a state where the stress response is decreased. Oxytocin, the love hormone, is produced. It creates a feel-good sensation, an ability to feel affinity with others, an affinity with yourself, an affinity with the world. It enables you to have less anxiety. It slows down the experience of muscle tension or any of the metabolic changes that happen when you're in fear or stress. And most importantly, it stimulates these reward centers in your brain that allow you to achieve the belief that anything is possible. And that's really what I, find really important in the state of well-being or health or resilience, in that there's a state of positive illusion that we need to move forward. If we didn't have positive, this state of illusion that's positive, you'd never actually try to reach any goals because you'd say that's impossible, it'll never happen, and then you wouldn't do anything. And we also see that in the state of medicine with the placebo response, which is utilized to study in procedures or drugs to see, they compare these procedures or drugs to shams to see whether these procedures or drugs are valid or whether what they say is placebo, it's sugar pill. For me, those studies I'm not so interested in whether or not a procedure works. I'm more interested in the power of the brain to elicit the same response as a drug. That to me is incredible. And love actually has that same physiological state. It's that state of trust that I can do this and I can make it happen. And your body actually responds in kind and creates that same, that outcome that you desire many times. And not only that, it has an influence on others to influence them to believe in the same. When you're feeling so trusting, there's a lot of other people that are influenced to trust as well. And now we have, more of a global effect. And so we know that love has that addictive or cumulative effect, and we really can access that through different states of being in love, whether it's a person that we're in love with, or we actually, which I advocate, is falling in love with ourselves so that we treat ourselves better. And of course, spiritual love is really the most profound, where we are in a state of, connection to the entire universe, whether we are out in nature or we're praying or we have a spiritual belief that allows us to really believe in impossible.
So you're talking about a lot of different kinds of love. In particular, to me, what's interesting is the idea of self-love, because when I work with people, I see that a lot of them are very much lacking in self-love. How would you support someone in being more loving to themselves?
Well, let's first understand where self-love comes from. All right. So, self-love is a state of knowing that you are worthy and knowing that you are a valuable being. And because of that, you're going to do a lot of self-care because you want to keep yourself around. So we know that that's not the case. So why is that? Well, no one had a perfect childhood. The programming of the brain and the programming of the development of self is happening in the early years of brain development. The brain isn't even fully formed until your late 20s. But by the time your, intellectual mind is developed, the notion of self has already been developed in the early years. So for me, it's about reprogramming, and it's about reprogramming the social love aspect, which is the basis, the foundation of how we discover who we are, and also the spiritual love aspect of understanding that I can trust the universe is out there to support me, not punish me. So it's a lot of changing of paradigms that we've been raised with, good being good or bad. Understanding that we're valuable beings just because we exist. So I do that through a, process of reprogramming through, the meditations that I utilize, and also a lot of the, connecting with underlying core beliefs that are negative and self-defeating, and start changing them to ones that are, self-enhancing, self-loving. Through the experience of receiving love. And I also encourage people to form new social networks and, maybe spiritual groups and things like that to really enhance the social and spiritual love experience that they have in every day.
That sounds wonderful. And as you spoke about enhancing their social connections, it also made me think about the people in my practice who really have very few friends and are quite socially isolated. And some of them are very ambivalent about connecting to others, and some of them want to, but they just don't seem to be able to manage it. How would you support someone in reaching out and making more meaningful connections with others?
Well, the first thing, as I mentioned, is doing the work on themselves. So I usually have them start with the meditative practice, with changing their nutrition, start paying attention to how things make them feel. I do a lot of heart work, open the heart work, and healing of the heart work. And as we work with that, they get, okay, here's the group I want you to join, or let's look at some groups that you're thinking about joining, and have them sort of slowly initiate that process, but also work on the friendships that they currently have, to see how those enhance. But most of the time, as people do the internal work, the external work follows. They don't really have to really put that much effort into it. So that's why it has to start with the internal work.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And you also talked about the spiritual work and why that's so profound. Why is that so profound, do you believe?
Well, again, at the end of the day, we need to recognize that we are, beings who are connected to something much larger than we are. That the actual definition of spirituality is the profound belief that we're connected to something much larger. So without that belief, you don't have to believe in God. It's just, you can belong to nature, it's just that belief of not being alone. And so the very opposite of love is the concept of separation and being separate and alone. And if you have that belief system, remember we're social beings, and we haven't been around long enough to evolution to actually kick into our brain. So our brain is still pretty much thinking about living in the wilderness and that we need a social infrastructure to be able to survive. So if somewhere in your brain you believe you're all alone, that's going to create more isolation and more stress and more fear. So the spiritual love is really just the aspect of knowing that I'm not alone, and knowing that I'm not being punished, and knowing that I'm being supported somehow in some larger sense. And we're so wired not to believe that, especially with, our religious upbringings, that's a real challenging one. And when we do actually connect with that and consistently, it just makes for a much more peaceful existence.
That makes a lot of sense. I wanted to ask you about a concept that keeps coming up in my practice, which is the concept of people being bullied or picked on. And a lot of my patients have had these difficult childhoods, and they seem to recreate scenarios either in their personal relationships with a partner or with their friends or in their workplace where people are picking on them or bullying them. How would you use your message to help somebody get out of that kind of situation?
Well, first we want to look at, what part of this am I attracting? And it's not about blame. I want to make that very, very clear. This isn't that I'm bringing this on myself. It's about the energy that I'm bringing forward. What am I choosing? So if it's a partner, I choose what I know. So if I don't believe that I have self-worth, I will choose a situation where I don't get that self-worth, reinforced. So again, it's an internal process. Now, if you can get out of that situation, I encourage people to do that. We try to figure out ways for them to do so, to create an outlet so that they can get out, especially, if it's an abusive situation. For many people, it's not outwardly abusive, not physically abusive, but maybe emotionally or psychologically abusive. They're not ready to leave. They can't. They don't have the money. So again, it's really building up that person's fitness, their strength, their self-esteem. I had somebody who came to me yesterday who's in a really, emotionally, I would say, abusive marriage. Not something that she's capable of leaving, doesn't really think she wants to leave. But so what we're doing is we're enhancing her sense of self. So, getting her to meditate, getting her to work on old stories that need to be rewired because those stories keep, recurring because those are the stories that she's attached to. So it's really recognizing what is my story, what is my underlying belief, what is it that I'm going to change it to, how do I give my story a new job description if I'm that attached to it, and then start building up, a support system. So it's really about, how are you going to learn that you're loved? Well, you need to have other people around you that can teach you that. So between, the coaching that people get and then, finding the right group for them to be part of, getting them exercising is really important, and enhancing the way they actually treat themselves through nutrition and exercise, meditation, sleep. So really building a solid infrastructure, they usually get strong enough to raise their vibration so that person either leaves or they're strong enough to leave them.
That sounds like a very integrated plan that really brings all the different aspects of self into play to help the person become more empowered.
Exactly.
And you used the word power before. What to you is the difference between those kinds of people who want to have power over others and becoming empowered yourself?
Well, somebody who needs to have power over others is weak, right? So that person, that person doesn't have a strong sense of self-security. And in order for them to feel more secure, they need to feel that they have power over other people. That makes them feel better. Remember, we're driven by the need for relief. It's always that way. You go to the bathroom because you need relief. You're hungry because you need relief. You go and find a partner because you need relief, being alone. Whatever it is, there's an underlying issue that motivates the action. And so if somebody wants to have power over others, it's because internally they don't feel that they have the power, and they need to assert that power so that they can keep it and have it. When we feel internally empowered, then we don't have the need to do anything. Remember, this is about being able to have non-attachment to our actions. We do something because we can. We do it because it feels like the right thing to do, but not because we have to get some type of relief that is going to be at the end hurtful to ourselves or others. That's usually not conducive for survival of the species.
Absolutely. And that makes me think about how some people make a contribution to society. Some people are oppressive in society, and some people are a drain on society. How would you support people in being the kind of person who is making a contribution?
Again, it's really all part of an internal process, and whether or not that individual is desiring to change. So, you and I both know that we've a lot of people that come our way that are so attached to their story, they're not prepared to make any change. And knowing that they're a drain and not a contribution just enhances their sense of shame and their sense of low self-worth, and it just makes them feel worse. And then they just, and that reinforces the story, and what bad people they are, and that they're never going to amount to anything. So the first thing is having a very serious conversation with them about their attachment to the story. And do you really want to get better? And I have this conversation with people who have serious illnesses. And I say, well, so do you have a death wish? Do you really want to be alive? And a lot of people aren't so sure. They're really not so sure, and they're not so sure how they can be alive without this identity that they've held on to for a really long time. And so I don't really throw them, under the bus with that kind of language of, do you want to be a drain on society, or do you want to be helpful to society? It's really not helpful for me in any way. This is about feeling empowered. When you are empowered, you will help society. It's just how it works. When your heart is full, you want to help others. You want to be generous. So I encourage people to pay attention to what it feels like, and I teach them what it feels like when the heart is full versus when the heart is empty, and what do you feel like you're driven to do? And they find that when their heart is full and what they're driven to do is then to be more altruistic and helpful to society, they really, really like it, and that becomes addictive. So rather than saying to people, do you want to be a drain, or do you want to be, a helper? I'd rather say, do you want to feel empowered, or do you want to feel weak? And once they feel empowered, they really do go out and do wonderful things. And that feels so good to them. They just want to do more.
Sounds wonderful. Your latest book, Your Health Destiny, How to Unlock Your Natural Ability to Overcome Illness, Feel Better, and Live Longer. That's quite a title. What brought you to writing this book, and what is the message in the book?
Well, I've been working on this book, for a long time. I mean, it's sort of the culmination of these, 20 years of being in medicine, and putting everything together in a way that is accessible for people. But I have written a lot of different proposals, and the initial title was about, becoming the new strong in the world, or, resilient, some type of resiliency model. And, and I wrote a bunch of proposals, and, there weren't a lot of, people that were, interested, mostly because, I think positive psychology and resiliency stuff is sort of overwritten, and, who's really listening anymore. And my publisher, said to me, okay, we love you. We don't love this proposal. Let's talk. Tell me what you do in your practice. And I told him, I said, this is what I do, exactly what I've explained to you. And he said, well, it sounds to me like you help people change their health destiny. And I said, I think you just gave me the title of my book. And so, he said, okay, right. Give me something on that, so I, wrote about 30 pages over the weekend and handed it in. He said, we love it. You got yourself a contract. And so the book kind of got written, as we went along, but it wasn't that difficult because it was really, like I said, putting together 20 years of my work in a palatable way. So it is a fusion of, Western allopathic medicine and all the wisdom traditions that I've studied over the years and, what I put into my practice. So it is about understanding your anatomy. It is about understanding the brain and physiology and, neurophysiology. So that stuff is in there in a way that is understandable for any reader. It's not complex. It's just enough so you can understand how the body works and its functions and what the statistics say. What do you need to watch out for? What are the risks? What are the red flags? And then it's broken down into, what are wisdom traditions telling you about this part of the body? And how can you start paying attention to this part of the body? I call it witnessing your physiology, paying attention to what it's saying to you. What are the underlying emotions or beliefs that you're holding there? And then finally, it's giving people, the tools, which is, the R of power, which is, reward, release, reward, and reset, restore the body back into balance. And it's giving them the tools that can correct that issue or that part of the body, including nutrition and meditation and stretches or physical movements or things that you can do for social support, the ways you can access benefits from nature, so on and so forth. So each chapter is broken down into systems of the body, and all those tools are given to you.
It sounds amazing. It sounds extremely thorough, especially if I'm going to encourage all the listeners to go out and buy your Health Destiny, but is there one or two little nuggets of wisdom that you could share with us today that if you wanted somebody who read this book to take a couple of nuggets away, what would they be?
Well, I think, the biggest nugget is remember that you are part of nature. You are born from the earth and you'll go back into the earth, just like everything else in nature. And nature doesn't put chemicals in itself. Human beings put chemicals in nature. Nature, Mother Nature accepts all her creatures. She doesn't say you're bad, you're good. Nature just as soon lets a forest fire burn or a flower bloom. It's not personal. It's a process of life. So I think it's learning to understand that as nature, what do I need to nurture myself to thrive, right? So nature and nurture. What is my nature and what do I need to help myself thrive so I can be at my highest best for the highest good? And so if you take on that mindset, instead of I have to get something done, or if I get money, then I'll be happy, or if I get a partner, then I'll be happy. And we start removing this enough issue and just stay with I am nature and what do I need to nurture my nature? What do I need to nurture myself to thrive? Then we start changing the mindset of how we approach ourselves. We start slowing down and really starting to pay attention to what the body's really trying to tell us and to make healthier choices. So really look at your nutrition, what is organically available? What can my body handle? And really start moving your body because it's meant to move. What kind of physical activity can I do that will help me feel better? Making sure that you get your rest so that you wake up feeling rested so that you can tackle your day. That's really important. So it's sort of looking at those things and taking the time to be quiet and developing some type of meditation practice.
It sounds like you're really telling people to come back to the truth of who we are as natural beings living on a natural planet.
That's right. Exactly.
That's wonderful. So this has been a really interesting conversation, very exciting, and you have a lot of wonderful ideas. I'm just wondering if you had a call to action to sum up our conversation with, if, to send out to the people who are listening, what would that be?
So, I just wrote an article about this. It probably will be in the Huffington Post fairly soon about my call to action. I really would like to create a global movement. I think the way medicine is perceived and practiced globally is, half good. And, it's treating things when they go wrong. And I want to encourage people to think about, do I want to be part of the sickness wellness spectrum, right? So either avoiding sickness or, working towards wellness, but it's really about avoiding sickness or treating sickness so that I can be well? Or do I want to live in a state of fitness? And it doesn't matter actually if you've been diagnosed with anything. You can still have the mindset of I want to be fit, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, physically, what have you, fit. Because when you're fit, a virus that comes through or even a diagnosis comes through is a challenge to be reckoned with. A person who hurts you is a person to be reckoned with. I think that that inspires me. It motivates me to say, I can reckon with this. I can handle this. Come what may, I got this. As opposed to I'm treating my sickness or I'm avoiding sickness. I mean, if you just think about that and feel into those words, I don't want to get sick or I need to treat my sickness versus, I'm so fit that I can handle anything. And so that's my call to action. I would like to create a movement of changing the way we look at health as a modality of being fit. So we have the sickness, wellness, fitness spectrum, which is actually something that was inspired to me through, getting a certification as a coach in CrossFit. It's really how, they perceive fitness. It's not just exercise, but it's really about the whole big picture of community and love and nutrition and exercise. And, they don't have the meditation piece like I do. But, so there are organizations out there that are part of this same idea that I've been, trying to put out there, this idea of a movement of changing the way, changing medicine from the outside rather than from the inside, of creating a movement of fitness, mind, body, spirit fitness of, what, life is going to throw me curveballs. It's going to be stressful. Stuff happens, but I got this. I'm okay. And I'm going to be okay.
It's very inspiring. It's really, very moving actually to hear it.
Right. And I think that if we all walked around with that mindset, I think we'd have a lot less illness.
Absolutely. I'm pretty sure you're correct.
Might even have world peace.
Okay, well, that's a very interesting point. How do you see world peace connecting to this idea of fitness?
Well, think about it. I mean, you talked about one person trying to have power over the other. That really just comes down to politics or, what we use for reasons to have war, reasons to pollute our planet, and reasons to hurt one another. I mean, where does greed come from? These are all very basic human emotions, and the way human beings have been since, time began that we were in existence. But it's really about saying, if I didn't have that fear of annihilation or disempowerment and thinking that something or someone was taking over and needed to have that power, if I felt empowered within myself and fit within myself, would I really need to do all these things?
So what you're really saying is that when we take care of ourselves and we move toward a state of optimal health, we're also creating a very different energy on the planet where people can live together peaceably and be contributors rather than oppressors or drains on society.
And that includes our environment.
Absolutely.
A natural environment.
Well, I think what you're saying is if we connect to our own natural state, then we wouldn't want to be exploiting or defiling nature around us.
Well, and it's our positive natural state, because we do have a negative natural state. Remember, we're animals.
Yeah.
But it's about being able to rise above that because we exist in the state of love rather than the state of fear.
Could you just say a little bit more about the state of fear?
Well, it's a natural state. You need it. Without it, again, we'd be dead. If I wasn't scared that I wouldn't have food, I wouldn't go out there and try to find it. But it's understanding that all negative emotions are appropriate signaling mechanisms for the body and mind to take action. But the problem is because we don't know how to separate the emotion as a signal, we take it on as a state of being, that it sort of drives our behaviors and reactions that are based on, fear-based behaviors and beliefs that drive us to then either hurt ourselves or hurt others. So it's really being able to remove ourselves from the engagement with the emotion and just understanding that the emotion is a signaling mechanism that's calling us into action. That if we get quiet enough and then remember that we're valuable beings as opposed to I'm not valuable and that's what's driving me, this person's not making me feel valuable, so I'm going to go hurt them. As opposed to, wait a minute, this person is making me feel not valuable, but I own that belief and I know that I'm valuable. The action will be very different.
So what you're saying is use our emotions as indicators of actions that we need to take as opposed to states that we just have to sit in.
Exactly. We not to personalize those emotions.
Mm-hmm. Because I think we all take things very personally, don't we?
Exactly. And that's the key. That's what I said about non-attachment. When we put ourselves in a state of love, we can achieve non-attachment, and then we can look at a situation for what it is and then make better decisions about what to do. We have better access to higher brain centers that make rational, intelligent decisions as opposed to reactive ones that come from lower brain centers.
So it sounds like it comes back down to taking the time to connect within, feel the love, and then the changes will come from that place.
Exactly.
That's wonderful. Dr. Eva, where can people find you if they're looking to read your articles or learn more about what you do or learn about your books?
I am all over the internet. So go to my website, drselhub.com. You can join me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest. I am all over as far as blogging. Most everything that I blog on other sites usually will end up on my website at some point. But you can look at Rebel Society, the Huffington Post, Mind Body Green. Those are just a few to name. So there's a lot of different articles that have gone up on there. And like I said, most of them will usually end up on my website at some point. And also I have multiple videos. So there's videos where I'm either talking about something or doing a guided meditation with some beautiful photos. And those are either on Vimeo or YouTube. The most recent ones will be on YouTube. So, you can do Google and pretty much find me anywhere.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today. It's been really a wonderful conversation, very inspiring and thought-provoking, and I'm sure the audience will be thinking about this for quite a while after we get off.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
It's really been a pleasure. Be well, and we'll talk again someday soon, hopefully.
I hope so.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm Dr. Marcia Sirota, and you can find me at marciasirotamd.com. Please sign up for my free monthly wellness newsletter. And if you like this show, please tell a friend and rate it on iTunes. Every person has a story to tell. Every story has a lesson to be learned. Whether through tremendous accomplishment or terrible failure, each person's journey reminds us of how we can use every experience in life as an opportunity to learn and grow in order to be our best self and live our best life. Being your best self means embracing the concept of ruthless compassion and letting go of the stories you've been taking for granted, the stories that tell you who you should be, what you should want, and how you should interact with your environment. Living your best life means that your actions are no longer driven by fear, anger, need, or greed, but by loving kindness and the desire to make a positive contribution to this planet, offering your wisdom, integrity, and energy to every situation you're facing. I hope that listening to this podcast has made you think, made you feel, and most importantly, made you question the status quo. I hope it shook things up for you and challenged some of your habitual attitudes, beliefs, and expectations. I hope it offered as many questions as it did answers, and perhaps even set you on your own journey of discovery toward becoming the very best version of who you can be.